Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name's Megan. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the mother of tarot. Here at my channel, I bring a lot of spiritual content, pick a card readings. But today, I'm really excited. I'm doing something a little different. I'm bringing my good friend on, Kristen, to share her experience in a cult. This is her first time really opening up about the details of her experience. So we're just gonna dive right into everything that happened. I haven't heard anything. I mean, I know she was in a call. I know you were in a call, but I haven't heard the details myself. So I wanted to give her, a good, safe platform. I feel like my channel, my subscribers are really supportive and have a really good vibration. And I thought this would be a great way for her to speak up about it and to really just heal from that. I know she already has healed from that, but I feel like speaking up about your experience takes it to a whole new level of healing. So introduce yourself, Kristen. She also has an amazing show as well called Conscious Collaboration. So if you want to talk a little bit about that before we dive into everything.
Okay, sure. Hey, I'm Kristen Vallis. I'm a holistic health coach and healer, and I do have a show every Thursdays at noon Pacific time. It goes live on YouTube and Facebook called Conscious Collaboration Cafe. And each week I bring on different healers. And Megan, you were a guest on my show. It was fantastic. And I bring on different healers because I feel like everyone is going to resonate with different types of healers at different times in their journey. And so even though I'm a healer, I don't feel like there's any conflict of interest for me to help promote other healers, because I think my main goal, and I think the goal of all healers, is really to help raise the consciousness of the planet. And so, we're all kind of working towards the same goal together. And the more we can connect with more people and bring that healing to the world, the better. So that's kind of the idea behind it.
Definitely. I love that. Yeah, I love your concept. I think it's beautiful and you've done such a good job with it, and there's such a good variety too.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I try. And I've met so many different healers in my journey. I started getting into the healing arts and just like learning about it, dabbling in it, and seeing healers myself when I was about 18. And, if you include like tarot readings and things like
Mhm.
that, which I do. And so, I've always been a spiritual seeker and looking for, connections that way to the divine. And then I started learning about like physical healing, like energy healing and different modalities and stuff when I was in my 30s. So it took me a while to get to that part.
Yeah, yeah.
But I did. And then I got chronically ill, and I was ill for a good 2.5 years before, like debilitatingly ill for like 2.5 years before I found a way to heal with food through the medical medium, which is how you and I met. And
Mhm.
yeah, so
Yeah.
just it's been quite a journey, but I've met so many different people and so many different healers. And I've found that the people who have suffered from chronic illness tend to be a lot of the healers out there. They
Oh yeah.
tend to be more sensitive to energies, which makes them more susceptible to chronic illness in the first place. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, because they've gone through so much, it makes them into the healer that they are. So, and that's certainly
Exactly.
been the case for me, and I know for you too. So,
Yeah. A lot of people with chronic illness or like anxiety and depression and think, even if it's like mental illness, but like both of those. I mean, I struggled with both, but some people struggle with more the mental or more with the, physical. But definitely,
yeah.
and I feel like our stories are so there's so much to it, like I feel like we could go on about so many different aspects of our story, but let's dive right. I just want to dive right into your experience. So walk us through like the beginning stages, like how you found out about this cult, how old you were, like how long, what time frame it was, and kind of like what intrigued you about this cult.
Right. So, I think the most important thing that I want people to know is that no one knowingly joins a cult. If
Right.
you knew it
Right.
was a cult, you wouldn't join it.
Right.
And you don't even realize you're joining anything. You know, most, well, first of all, not all cults are spiritual in nature. Mine was, but it was also, the guy was a brilliant, like, mad genius, because he combined so many different things to pull people in from different
Mm-hmm.
areas. So one of the things that he pulled people in through was weight loss. And
Okay.
there are food cults, and there are political cults, and there's lots
Mhm.
of different ways to have a cult. And you know, we're certainly seeing now in our worldwide situation, and certainly in our own politics here in the United States, that there are cults that are
Mhm.
political.
Oh
And
yeah.
so yeah, I think that's one of the first things that I want to impress on people is no one knowingly joins a cult. You know,
Right.
you start by going to a free event. Usually
Mhm.
that's usually, there's kind of a formula that they use.
Okay.
And so there'll be like free events to kind of, you know, get you to start meeting some of the people that are already in the cult.
Mhm.
And you meet the cult leader, and then, you know, you start to get to know their personality a little bit, so you start to create a little bit of trust with the group, but it's just a little bit, you know.
Mhm.
And you know, they try and keep those free events pretty fun and upbeat, and you know, um, just enough to pull you in to want to do something a little more. And
Okay.
so for my experience, you know, I went to a free weekend seminar, and it was a spiritual seminar on faith.
Mhm.
And so I did that. And, you know, of course, during the free event, they promoted some paid events. One of them was a weight loss program that I wanted to do because I was dealing with weight issues.
Okay.
And the other was this week-long retreat in Costa Rica. And I was like, well, I had financial issues too. I'm like, there's no way I can do that. Well, they did all these crazy things with money in this cult. And so basically, he would manipulate different members into giving donations to other people so that they could go to these retreats, because the
Okay.
more he could pull people in, then he could, you know,
Right.
indoctrinate more people.
Wow.
So that's what happened to me, is people donated, and I ended up going to Costa Rica. And it was like
Okay.
3 weeks after I went to this free seminar that this happened. And
Wow.
when I went to Costa Rica, that was when the real crap started happening, because
Okay.
they took me to a retreat center that was in the middle of the rainforest.
Mhm.
It was a 7 hour, very windy, scary road through, you know, the jungle to get to this place. You couldn't have found your way back to the airport. Like, you had to hire somebody to take you.
Wow. And
Yeah.
what was like going through your mind when you're in this car? Like, did you still feel good about it, or were you starting to feel like something was off?
Oh no, I had no idea yet.
You had no idea yet. Okay.
I know.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
I
you're
thought I
just
was
like
just on a cool
excited. I'm in
adventure.
Costa Rica. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And so, and you know, you're in like, so basically the assistant to the cult leader coordinated everyone's flights so that you would get to the airport around the same time, and you'd all go in a van or bus together to this retreat center.
Okay.
So that's how I got there. And yeah, so it's such a long way from the airport, and you're just in the middle of nowhere. And there's only like one little spot at the retreat center where you even have cell phone access. And, you know, so most of the time you're disconnected from your phone. And so that means everybody you know. And, you know,
Right.
these are some of the tactics that are used in cults to start to gain control over people. But they do it really slowly and
Yeah.
carefully. And it's very insidious. Like, you don't really know it's happening. You don't really think anything of it. You know, it's, you know,
Right.
presented to you like, yeah, well, you don't want to be, you know, using your phone during the retreat anyway, because you want to just be totally present, and, you
Yeah.
know, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, right? And that
Mhm.
all sounds good.
Mhm.
But and this is why cults are tricky, because so the devil speaks in half truths is the way that, you know, I can best describe it. And so, you know, some of the stuff they're saying you feel is true because it is true. And so then when the little white lies come in, you don't catch them as much. And the other thing is, like, I'm a highly intuitive person, and I was very intuitive walking into the cult, and I saw flags. I even saw flags at the free event, but everything, they have an explanation for everything. They explain everything away, and they're very, very good at it. And the thing is that, when you go to these even free events, right, the main cult followers that are really heavily indoctrinated, they're all there. And they're scattered throughout the audience, and they're, so like pro cult leader, and they really do believe that this person is, telling the truth and saving the world and all this stuff. And so they kind of start getting everyone else to, think, yeah, there must be something here, because you don't know walking in who's been there for several years and who's new, right?
I see.
So,
I see.
and this is a typical marketing tactic anyway. When you have live events, they'll sprinkle some people in the audience to, raise their hand and ask questions or participate or whatever, to encourage other people that are new to do the same thing. It's, kind of a group dynamic. And so, he really knew all of this. He really knew how to, very charismatic, many cult leaders are, and he really knew how to, draw people in.
And how big was the cult at this time? Like, how many people would you say was?
Yeah, so that's a great question too, because cults, they're hard to quantify in that way, because there's generally a core group of people that are really heavily indoctrinated, really heavily involved with the leader. And for this group, I'd say that was at any given time maybe 30 to 50 people. And then so this was not a huge cult, it's not like Scientology where there's, thousands. But then, you have your next group of people who come to some events, but they're not to the point where they're totally dependent on the cult leader for everything, right? And then you have your outlier people who come once in a while, and they think it's this or that fun, or they get something out of it, and they probably usually only come to the free events and whatever, right? So if you included all of those people, including all the outlier people, you probably had like 150, 200 people at any given time. And most of the people would change a lot. And even what I found is every maybe 2 or 3 years, the core people would change. And this is something I didn't realize until I had come out of the cult. But it's really fascinating to look at on the outside, because, he would basically abuse people to such a point that they would finally leave, but I mean, it really took some pretty heavy, or he would make a mistake and be discovered in his lies, and he'd lose a whole group of people, and he'd have to kind of start over. So that was kind of what would happen. And so I came in just as a group was leaving, and he was kind of starting to get new people again to be in his core group. So I came in at prime time for him to totally just hone in on me. So
he's like, I need more people, and they're like, he's like, donate.
He was really good at identifying people with a lot of codependency issues, self-worth issues, boundary issues. He studied so much about the brain, and he studied Carl Jung and like all the great psychologists. He studied he knew how to do behavioral modification, NLP, hypnosis, like he knew all of this stuff. And so he used like all these different techniques to get control over people. And he would use specific things for specific people. So he might tell one person that crystals are like, the devil's thing and you shouldn't have them, and he'll tell another person something completely opposite. And then when you question him, like, well, why are you telling that person? Well, because that's right for her, but that's not right for you. Like it, and he'd
Wow.
find a way to
Weird.
like explain all this stuff away.
He was
And
good with his words, and it
he
sounds like.
was, and he
Yeah.
also, like, behavior modification, he would use these tactics where, he would test people, like he'd poke you,
Mhm.
so he'd say something to you and see how you would react to it. And if you went along with what he said, then he'd keep going and he'd say something, even more, and see how much control he could get over you over time. And,
Mm.
he'd just keep testing the waters, or if you reacted badly to it, he'd back off a little bit. So he would just
Okay.
adjust. So what's interesting is, we see that happening this year with the pandemic, right? We see how the powers that be are presenting, if you go back to the beginning of the pandemic, when they first presented the idea of shutting things down, we're just going to shut it down for 2 weeks. That's it. Just 2 weeks. See how people do, right? And then wearing a mask. You need to wear a mask here, or you need to separate 6 feet, all these different things. They would test it out and see how people would react. And then they'd get a bad reaction. They'd pull back a little bit, or they'd change their mind about things. And then they'd come back again, and they'd tweak it a little bit. And, so
Mm.
we've been seeing this go on all year, and it's still going on, right? And they're
Mm.
just seeing, and as they're doing this, they're getting more and more and more control over the population, because
Mm.
people are starting to, they've already decided, like, okay, well, this is the new normal. And this is the other thing about cults, right? They come up with their own little catchphrases and their own dictionary. Basically, they come up with they make up new words, like,
Okay.
we never had the phrase social distancing before this year.
Yeah.
And it's not even accurate. It's physical distancing. It's not social distancing. Like, all these little
Mhm.
terms that they've come out with, this is all typical cult stuff.
Wow.
You have a whole language within a cult that is different from what general society accepts. And, you have a whole different language way of communicating. And so
Mhm.
now we see this happening. This is why it's so fascinating, having been in a cult and having to learn how cults work and to recover from it, that I'm watching what's happening. Like, I knew right at the first
Wow.
shutdown, I could see what was happening. I could see
Wow.
what was happening. And I'm like, no, I'm telling everybody, no, don't go along with this. Don't go along with this. I could see
Yeah.
it. And,
Wow. That's so,
and
I've never heard it from this perspective before, and it's interesting because, like, you've been through this experience and now you're seeing it the same way, and I know everybody watching probably has a different view on the pandemic and what's happening, and the legitimate, what's really legit, and what's you know what they're, I don't know, lying about or hiding the truth and stuff.
right.
But for me, I feel like, of course, I feel like the virus is real, but I feel like the way that they're going about it, I don't feel like it's right. But for you to bring up your perspective, I just think that's interesting, because I never thought of it as like a cult thing before.
Yeah.
But it does kind of make sense. It does kind of make sense.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. Yeah, I agree. I think there really is a virus. I don't
Yeah.
deny that, but I don't think that, the science is there to back up what they're claiming, and
Right.
they've been, like I said, changing their minds about things like so many times now. Oh,
Right. Right.
it affects you this way. It affects you this way. It's airborne. It's not airborne. Like all this stuff.
Yeah.
Even the testing. There's just been so many issues.
Yes,
But
that's true.
and there are some really good scientists out there who are speaking out now, who are explaining what is wrong with that from a scientific perspective. So this isn't
Right.
just opinion.
Right.
If you go
Right.
and seek out the information, it's there. Um, it's been really interesting from my perspective. Yeah, having been through that. And so there's this website that if anybody wants to learn more about how cults work, there's a great website called Freedom of Mind.
Mhm.
And it's run by a guy named Steve Hassan. I'm not sure if I'm saying his last name right, but he was in a cult too.
Okay.
And he is I think a psychologist. And so he writes books about the cult recovery and all that. He wrote a book recently about the cult of Trump, which is really interesting, because it's interesting to me because he can see that part of the cult scenario that's happening, but he doesn't see the bigger picture that is not just Trump. Trump is like a cult within a cult, but there's so much bigger.
Cults
and I'm
everywhere.
not even talking about QAnon, like. QAnon to me is another cult, and there's there's truth in some of the stuff that's been said through oh gosh, I'm getting low battery thing. There's been some truth spoken there, but it isn't true, and I think we're all in the process of sorting that out of what is true and what's not. Like none of us really know, but I'm talking beyond QAnon. Like there's bigger stuff going on, and
there's a lot.
there's a lot going on,
Let's go back to. I want to go back to your story more though, because I think it's fascinating, and I like where you were going with that, because it was really interesting, and I like looking at the bigger picture. But I'm just curious about. I want to hear more about the retreat and kind of like what happened there exactly, and then kind of go after that of how you came into realization of like something's wrong, like what were the telltale signs, and kind of what I mean. I'm curious myself.
So the first retreat, so I was, like I said, I was isolated, and there was a point in the retreat where I was like, this is really whacked out. I just want to leave. And it was about the halfway point in the week where he started pretending that he was casting demons out of people. Okay. And like I came from a Catholic background. I wasn't Catholic anymore at that point. I wasn't affiliated with any religion, but casting demons out was not part of my background.
Yeah, you're like, this is too much. Yeah.
And seeing people like convulsing on the floor and like this big show and everything, and so it was stuff like I couldn't understand, I couldn't explain, and it freaked me out, and I wanted to leave. So we're at the retreat center, and on the property, you're in the rainforest, and there's a path, a long path through the rainforest to get from the main hall where we did most of our activities to where the lodging was, right? Okay. So that path, it was nighttime, and the lights on the path were off, and I guess he had control over that. So the lights on the path were off. So when I wanted to leave the retreat center, I would have had to walk through this rainforest along this path in the dark, and like that wasn't happening. Like I was too scared.
I would have been
too trapped, and I was, and so so that was my first thing. Like I wanted to leave and I couldn't, and then of course like things got explained away and normalized and whatever, and so I've kind of like, okay, I guess I can be all right with that or whatever. And then and then I can't remember, I think it was the next night that they had somehow convinced me that I had demons in me, and this was the two ladies who were assisting him, that were helping run the retreat, and he had already left for the evening, and we stayed behind in the meeting area, and they were praying with me and all this stuff, and then I guess they were communicating with him during this time via text, and I didn't know that. So he met us as we were walking back on this long pathway. It was a full moon too. It's like, so you couldn't have made a better movie. And and so the moon had the pathway kind of lit up, and so they were walking with me toward the lodging, and he came up the path from the other direction and met us on the path, and he did this prayer with me where he looked you eye to eye, and you were supposed to stare in his eyes without blinking. And this was a way, and I still haven't figured out which method this is to get control over people. If this is NLP, I think it is. But you basically stare in the person's eyes and you tell them not to blink. And because he was also in a power position because he was much taller than I was. And you know, that was the moment I can clearly say he really got control over me. Like that was the moment, because I saw things looking at his eyes that way that I could not explain. Like, I was seeing like all these demonic things in his eyes. And when I asked him what I was seeing, he's like, that's all coming out of you, which was not true. That was in him.
Oh my gosh.
So he convinced me that he was the only one who could save me, like that he could pull these demons out of me. And so from that point forward, I was pretty dependent on him. And then as the years went by, I got more and more dependent on him, you know, and he used these different techniques to convince me like he was the only one who could save me, you know. So
so you were in the cult for how long?
For 3 years.
3 years. Wow.
For 3 years.
And
yeah.
was there other retreats and things like that?
Oh, yes. Yes, because retreats was how he made his big money. So there were always weekend seminars that were paid too. And then he would occasionally, I think about 4 times a year, he'd do the free one to try and bring more people in. But mostly it was these paid weekend seminars in between the retreats. And then you would be told you needed to go to every retreat too, or you just weren't working hard enough on your spiritual journey. And so like, and you know, I came into this situation in total poverty. Like I had $50 to my name when I went to that retreat. So I came back, like I couldn't pay my rent. I didn't have a job. Like I had been sick before that with pneumonia. Like it was just this whole thing. And so, you know, I was so dependent on him. And then I got a job, and, you know, it wasn't a great job, but I got a job, and basically all my money would go to him, you know? And we were supposed to tithe and all this stuff, which is really common in spiritual retreats. I mean, spiritual cults. And so, you know, there was all of that going on. But then he had at the end of this first year that I was in the cult, he did his very first master retreat, is what he called it, where you go 21 days in the rainforest to meditate in silence for 21 days.
Wow. Okay.
So he spent that entire 21 days getting more and more control over each person, because during that meditation, we were not to look at each other, touch each other, communicate with each other in any way. But once a day, you would have a session with him.
And you could look at him.
Yes, you did. He would do the eye-to-eye prayer all the time. That's how he would continue to get more control over you. And he would, you know, ask you what was coming up in your meditation, and then he'd, you know, manipulate it to whatever he wanted you to think, and, you know, all of that. So, and then on top of that, so when we finished that, that 3 weeks of silent meditation, one of the guys who was there, he had been in the Russian military at one point, and he said, you know, this was tougher than being in the military. Like, because he basically starved us. We were fasting for almost the entire time, even though we were doing this grueling meditation, because you would walk for an hour and then sit for an hour, walk for an hour, sit for an hour. He deprived us of sleep. For the last week, we didn't get to sleep at all. We had to meditate.
What was his reason behind that? Like,
well, these are militaristic grade torture techniques, so that you wear someone's senses down, so that they basically will do whatever you want them to and say whatever you want them to say. When you deprive people of food and sleep, and we weren't allowed to shower, so our basic necessities were deprived.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And
so what was like his reasoning behind it? Like, what did he say?
What excuse did he give?
Yeah, like what was his?
Oh gosh, I can't even remember now. He made up some spiritual crap about it. You know?
Right.
I don't remember now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he had an excuse for everything, a reason for everything. And of
Right.
course, because you trust him completely, you think, of course, this makes sense. Of course, he
Mm.
wouldn't lie to us, you know?
Right. Right.
So, yeah, so he'd meet with us one-on-one during that retreat every day, and then he would do like a 1 hour discourse every evening for us as a group, which we also were only able to look at him. We could not look at anyone else, or communicate in any way. We only were able to listen. We weren't allowed to ask questions.
Uh-huh.
And so he would just, program. I mean, it's like watching TV, right? You just keep getting programmed. So,
Right. Right. Right.
yeah. So, and he would just, program us with all these things that he wanted us to believe, so that he could continue to have control over us. So we would continue to believe that, we needed him and couldn't live without him, basically. So,
Wow. So
and that's,
it was all like a big, mostly a money scheme, right? His cult for the most part, or control,
I
power,
mean,
but
it's really about power. It's really
yeah.
about energetic power, because, he was a sociopath, like most cult leaders are, which is, I think, a step above a narcissist. He had no ability to have any sort of empathy for anyone. He just didn't have that, but he could fake it really well. And if you want to learn about sociopaths, read The Sociopath Next Door. It's an excellent book for that.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
yeah, it's quite something. And so yeah, I think he was a full-on sociopath, and his thing was really about siphoning energy from people. And so what he would do is he would create a lot of drama between the different cult members. He created so much drama between me and other cult members. I had no friends in the cult, not real friends, because he
Really?
created so much drama between us all the time. So everybody would be texting him all the time, daily, right? I don't know how he kept up with all the lies, but he would, have different lies going between different people, and he would be weaving these webs of drama and telling, like, this person that I said this about them when I never, like it, what just
Wow.
complete out and out lies, to create all kinds of drama. And he would do the same things at these retreats, because the more he could create drama, the more energy and adrenaline he could stir up, and he could siphon your energy. So it's really about siphoning the energy. So yes, it's about power, but it was about sucking your energy, because he didn't know how to create his own. So
Yeah.
he understood, he understood a lot about how energy worked, but what he was missing was he didn't know how to create it himself. He didn't know that he could be the source of his own energy. So he felt like he had to get his energy from everyone else. So that's what he did.
Wow.
So,
That is
yeah,
insane.
it is insane. Yeah, it is insane. And that's really how the cults work. And so, whether you talk about, Manson or Osho, or, any of the great cult leaders, they're all the same at the heart. Because when I did my cult recovery, um, there were people from all kinds of different cults. There were Scientologists there were Jehovah Witnesses, there were Mormons, all different groups. And then there were other people from small groups like I came from and stuff. And we all had very similar experiences when you look at, like, the framework of how a cult works.
Wow.
And Freedom of Mind, the website, has this great, what he calls the BITE model. It's behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And those four
Mm.
components make up, how people are indoctrinated and kept into cults. And the other thing, in case my battery dies, I wanted to share, is that one of the things that keeps people in cults is that there is a lot of fun stuff that happens in cults in
Mm.
between all the public shaming and the abuse and all of that. There was a lot of that going on in the group I was in.
Right.
He loved to pick on me and publicly shame me in pretty much every event that he did. And then he'd, create this big transformation in me to show, like, how great the event was, and how, like, he loved to use me as his poster girl for everything. And
Wow.
I was such a willing victim, and so, we played our roles well. And basically by the end of my cult experience, and when I, got into recovery and started really understanding, one of the first places I went was a battered women's shelter. For counseling, because I didn't have any money for counseling, and I couldn't find anyone else who would touch me with a 10-foot pole because they didn't understand cults. And so I couldn't find any help, even though I had been raped. Like, rape recovery wouldn't help me, like, because there was this
In the
whole
cult?
other.
You were
Yeah.
raped in the cult by the leader?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. During the last year, he pulled me in as his new assistant because his other assistant finally discovered he was lying about stuff and left. And so he made me his new assistant, and then he had me start living with him, and then he created this like phony relationship with me, and he had relationships with all these other women, and they were all secret. None of us knew about the others. And ultimately that's how I got out of the cult, because the end of that year, he had created so much drama, and he ended up firing me and hiring me back and firing. I mean, it was just drama, drama, drama. And then he started a relationship with me because he wanted to make sure his retreat went off well. And if we were not in a good place together, I wouldn't have done my best for him. So, he wanted to make, so he pretended to like be in love with me, and he starts romancing me. But even in that, he manipulated me so much throughout the day, every day, in terms of the relationship. But so he would say things like, you know, he'd lay it on thick, like how much he wanted to be with me and couldn't stop thinking about me, and he, couldn't wait to see me again, and all this stuff. And then like an hour later, he'd be saying, you know what, we shouldn't be doing this. You're my assistant. This isn't right. And then he'd go back and he'd be like, oh, but I can't live without you, like an hour later. And then he'd go back again and say, but oh, we can't do this. So I'd be like in these emotional like turmoil, like constantly throughout the day. And after about a month of this, I actually, so about a month of this, I started losing my memory. That's the first thing I noticed. My memory started going. And then the rape happened. And when the rape happened, within that week, I was so dissociated that I would call it like a spiritual emergency. There's a book on that too, called that. Or you could say I had a psychotic break, whatever you want to call it. But for about 5 weeks, I was so dissociated from my body, like I was not able to function like a normal person. I was wandering around downtown LA. I didn't know where I was. And like, I know my way around 5 counties in Los Angeles. Like,
so
for
that
me
was
not
like
to
not
know where
normal.
I am, like, that's just not me,
That's scary.
So it was scary, and it was a miracle that like nothing horrible happened during that time to me. At least not that I remember. Because I did have a lot of periods where I completely blacked out. I don't remember what happened. So that was really crazy. And then after that happened, he pretended he was being very supportive of me to the other cult members, but what he was really telling them all along was that I had gone crazy and that I was trying to purposely sabotage him and all this. I mean, it was just nuts. But to me, he was saying, oh, I'm just telling people you were sick and that, you needed some time off and whatever. Like, so these are the kinds of lies that he would tell us. And, I later found out the truth from other people who left when I did. So what happened is later that year, a whole bunch of women found out that he was having relationships with multiple women, because we all were giving our sob stories to this one particular woman in the cult who was like kind of a maternal figure. So we'd go and we'd cry on her shoulder, and she's like, wait a minute. So you're having a relationship with him and you're having a relationship with him? And she put it together, and she was finally like, you have to stop torturing yourself. You weren't the only one he was doing this with. She finally just told us. And so when that happened, like, I don't know, a huge portion of his core group left. We all left. And that was how I got out. But it took me a couple of months to really firmly decide I was out. And during that time, he was threatening my life. I was hiding out in the desert because I was terrified he was going to kill me.
Was he
Yeah, it
saying,
was,
was he was like giving you death threats?
he was giving me death threats. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And even after he realized that like I wasn't coming back, that all of his tactics weren't working, he tried to continually manipulate me for a good chunk of that year following when I left. Um, and then I think he finally just like moved on to other people. But,
Right,
you
right,
know,
right.
but I was still terrified of him, even though he
Yeah.
had stopped threatening me and stuff. And so then when he died in the end of 2016, from a ayahuasca overdose,
Oh, right,
um,
because you said he did psychedelics, right? But
he
you
did,
you didn't do them, but he did them, or
he brought those into the group right when I was having the psychotic break. So I was not involved in that.
oh,
And I
so
thank God
before they
because
weren't around. Okay,
no, he was
okay,
doing them, but we didn't know he was doing them. And
I see.
he brought it into the group because he wanted to do it more because he was so addicted to it. So,
Right, right.
and he figured out it would be a great way to make money too, easy money.
Yeah.
So
And
he
so
he started
how did you
doing.
say he died?
He died in Peru, I think, doing on an ayahuasca retreat.
Oh,
So, yeah.
well, not from the ayahuasca, right? Because you can't really die
Well,
from but if something maybe
you
he did
can
on it.
if you abuse it, you can.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, they said it was a heart attack, but I believe it was induced by his abuse of it over time.
Mm.
So, so yeah, I mean, that's my personal opinion. There's no, there was no body. Like for a long time, I was like not even sure he was really dead because,
Right,
yeah,
right. All the
until
lies and the
I finally,
manipulation. You're like, how
yeah,
do I believe anything?
exactly. So I
Wow.
finally asked my new coach who channels a stream of consciousness, and she did confirm that he did. She actually told me he killed himself because he felt like we didn't deserve him because we didn't appreciate him enough. So, and I'm like, yeah, now that sounds like him. I can believe
Wow.
that. So,
So
yeah.
then so you got out of the cult and it sounds like you went through some therapy, right? To like rehabilitate yourself after or was it more just group sessions?
Yeah, so the first place I landed was the battered women's shelter for counseling. They were the only ones who would help me, and I wasn't living there, but I would go for counseling, and it was amazing to me. And this is something I love to impress on your viewers too, is that even though he never hit me, I they give you a questionnaire when you come into the shelter, and you rate your experience of abuse.
Yeah.
And they had 4 categories, mild, medium, mild, severe, and highly severe, right? And my category rating was severe, right on the border of highly severe.
Wow.
And he
Yeah.
never actually hit me. And so I think that's so important to understand, like
Mm-hmm.
how damaging, how abusive, like just words and certain actions. There were some physical things. Of course, there was the rape, and there were the
Right.
physical deprivations of sleep and food, which he did with us ritualistically throughout the year, even though we weren't at the meditation retreat. He had a whole thing where you would fast once a week, and you know, depriving people of sleep is a major cult tool so that you don't have time to think. You keep people really, really busy, and you
Yeah.
deprive them of sleep so they can't stop and realize like that there's something wrong.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah, so there was a lot of things that were going on, but yeah, so I did that, and then I found a therapist, and she didn't jive with me, and then I also did 12-step. I went to Codependence Anonymous, and I started there, and I did some other 12-step programs too, and I got a sponsor and worked the steps, and that helped me through a bunch of it.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I went back to a new therapist, and so it's been. I actually just stopped going to therapy this summer, so it's been 6 years, 7 years, because I left at the end of 2013. So I don't know, 6 years,
Yeah.
I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, and I really feel like the work I'm doing now and that I started last year with my coach has been the most beneficial to me out of all of it. But I feel like all of those were important in my
Definitely.
recovery process. So,
Yeah.
and, you know, just learning about cults, actually, before I even went to the battered women's shelter, the first thing I did is I went online to like understand what the heck I was involved with, because I didn't
Yeah.
even understand, you know.
And I think that's a huge thing, because like I can relate to that. And not that I was in a cult, but I was in an abusive relationship, and I didn't even understand what I was dealing with until I looked it up online, and I found all these women going through the same thing that I went through, and that's what finally pushed me to break up with him, because I was like, oh, this is like, when you're stuck in it. Yeah. And
You
it's
don't
interesting.
know.
You don't.
Yeah, you
No,
don't,
you're
because the
blinded.
whole thing with battered women syndrome, and I had that, right? Because, you know, any high control relationship is going to give you that effect where, you know, you have this cognitive dissonance, you're in denial, but there's a cycle of abuse that happens. You know, there's the honeymoon phase, and, you know, where they really lay it on thick and they're so lovey-dovey and they shower you with gifts and all that, and then they get really abusive, and then when they see you're about not to take it anymore, that's when they turn on the charm again, and it's this cycle.
Yeah.
So you want to believe that, oh, you know, he actually is good, he actually does love me, and then he starts abusing the crap out of you again, and then you start to doubt, and then he starts turning on the charm again, and it's a cycle. And it works exactly the same in the cults. Exactly the same.
One thing I really wanted to talk about, going along with this, is what are the big flags for people to watch out for cults so they don't get like sucked in? Because I feel like a lot of people in the spiritual community, or like in the healing community, there's so many out there, and not to like, I don't want to scare people watching this, but just to like, what do you think are the big signs to look out for if you go to a free event? And I mean, you kind of already talked about them right now. Like if people are donating for you to go somewhere, like that's probably a big, to watch out for something like that. But what are the big flags?
The thing is there's a lot of good, credible free events. It's a
right.
It's a marketing technique to help introduce you to someone's personality so that you can get to know them before you invest in a program with them, right?
Exactly.
And there's a lot of good, legitimate.
I'm not saying don't go to free events. Like I go to free events.
Well, I want to make sure people understand that, because
and I went to Costa Rica to do ayahuasca, and that was not a cult. Like could have been, right? I was kind of paranoid though. Part of me was like, what if this is a cult?
And that's the thing, is it's really hard to identify, actually. The best defense is to really know yourself, like really hone your intuition, trust yourself, trust your intuition. The more that you can live from the inside out instead of the outside in, so if you need other people's validation, if you need other people to, tell you what to do, you're more susceptible to falling into a cult, because that's what they do, right? So if you are willing to do the spiritual work on yourself and learn to live from the inside out, so everything needs to come from within first. If it doesn't feel right in your inner compass, you don't do it. Doesn't matter what anyone else says or what anyone else is doing. And this is why the work I've been doing with my coach Joy Kingsborough has been so great for me, because she really helps guide you to do that. She doesn't even want you to do what she says. Like, she doesn't want you to be dependent on her. And she really has a way of getting you to the place where you really learn to trust yourself and have your own connection. Anybody who says that they're your connection to source, God, whatever you want to call it, that's a flag, right?
Yeah,
because
that's huge. Yeah, right.
That's a huge flag right there. If they're claiming that you need them to connect, but it's really tricky and it's really insidious. And when you see the flags, because you will see the flags if you have any inner sense at all going on, you will see them, but they'll try to explain them away. And that's where the more that you trust yourself, then you're not going to listen to those explanations. You're not going to fall for that. But a lot of people are susceptible to it because look at this, what is happening in the world right now. Like, look at what is happening.
You're right. And I tell people that a lot, like when you're trying to find a spiritual coach to work with, or a tarot reader or a health coach or, nutritionist or anybody, like, especially in the spiritual community, like they should be empowering you. They should be guiding you on your path. Like they shouldn't be telling you exactly what to do. Like, you need to do this and you need me and you need this and you have to sign up for my, 2-year program and be committed to me and I'm all knowing. Like, they should be empowering you and telling you that, like, you have the information and like helping bring that out of you. Like feeling empowered, like you should feel empowered working with somebody.
Yeah, it's funny because I just went and watched some of the YouTube videos that the cult leader had posted, before he died and all that. And one of them was how to recognize a true spiritual teacher. And I was just laughing when I watched it now because I'm just like, oh my God, I can see right through this. So one of the things he said was, your teacher will be a mirror for you, right?
Okay.
But the thing is that his idea of a mirror was to show you what a piece of shit you are and, all the bad things about you and blah, blah, blah. A true spiritual guide would actually help mirror for you that you are source, that you are love.
Yeah.
That's the only thing they should be mirroring for you. If they're mirroring anything else, it's not a mirror, it's a manipulation. And it's abuse. And it's abuse, not that they're not going to gently, lovingly point out some things that might help you to become aware of, but
like
they're not going to use it to turn it against you, which is what a cult leader will do. He had these he'd give us free one-on-one sessions with him to gather all this intel on us, basically, of all the shit going on in our lives or things we've done in the past. And then later he would use it against you. So, this is the kind of stuff they do. That's not mirroring. That's abuse, So, but, the thing is that they do stuff to give you a reason to trust them. So it's really insidious. It's really tricky. And, I think one of the things about the shift of consciousness that's happening right now from the third dimension to the fifth is that we are all starting to wake up to this truth about ourselves, that we are all spiritual beings, that we have our own connection to source, that we have source within us, and that we are the only ones that need that connection. And we're not all going to express source the same way. That's why we're all here. We're all unique expressions of source. So no one person on the earth is going to have exactly the same ideas or opinions or beliefs about something that someone else does. And when we get into these situations where we need other people's approval, we're still living in the 3D consciousness, So when we shift to the 5D consciousness for real, that's when we really know. We really know that, like, with beyond a shadow of doubt, unshakably, and you won't be susceptible to cults at that point.
Yeah. And I love that. I it's funny because when I asked you that question of like flags, you're like, it's funny because I was thinking you'd be like, well, if they say this and that and this and that, you're just like, no, focus on yourself. And I think that's so beautiful. I love that you brought that up. And I love all the work that you've done on yourself. And I shouldn't say work, all the growth, and how far you've come and overcoming that traumatic experience is just, it's made you so strong. And I love that you're able to share that with other people, because I'm sure somebody watching this, could see this video and then a week later maybe get introduced to like a cult and then be like, well, this doesn't feel right, or someone could be in a cult watching this saying like, oh, what, like, I'm just really glad that you came on here to, came to my channel to like talk about this, because I mean, it's a fascinating story, but it's just to see what you've come from and how you've healed with having gone through all of that. It's just really powerful, and it's beautiful. So
thank you. Yeah, it's really been great being here. And I have told my story to other people many times in my recovery journey, but I've never done it, publicly on the internet. And so it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time and, couldn't for various legal reasons. And so I'm really glad that you offered me this opportunity now to do it, because it has been really great to be able to put this out there publicly and just, lay it out like it is. And I think at such an important time in history too, for people to really understand how this all works,
Yeah.
And
I'm going to be looking at this pandemic in a whole new light now. Like, I knew there was like things that I didn't like about it, and I knew there was some bad energies out there. I mean, there are in a lot of things going on in the world right now, but there's a lot of good as well. But seeing it from that perspective, it's going to make me look at it a little differently, for sure.
Yeah, there's so much good going on in the world, much more than there is negative. But yes. Part of the programming is to be shown the negative over and over and over again, so that we don't believe that there's anything good, right?
Yeah, and that we don't think that we can do anything about it, and that we're helpless and we're stuck at home, and you have to
behavior control, information control, thought control, emotion control. It's all there. So and one of the interesting things too, I just want to add before we finish is, one of the things I found there are organizations that are specifically focused on cult recovery. Freedom of Mind is one of them. ICSA, the International Cultic Studies Association in Bonita Springs, Florida, is another one. And they're great organizations, and they helped me a lot in my initial recovery. But what I see now is that they are limited in a way, because they basically take you out of the cult indoctrination and try to re-indoctrinate you into what they consider normal society. So there's the limitation there, is that you're still not learning that you are source, that you have your own connection. You're being basically indoctrinated into a much more socially acceptable cult, is basically all it is. And it does a disservice to people in the end, because they do discourage what they call thought stopping techniques like meditation and stuff. And I think meditation's been such a critical part of my healing journey, and ability to really go within and connect and stuff. And so I would say to anybody watching this that does, go to those resources for help, just bear that in mind and always trust your own inner guidance over everything else. I'm so grateful I did. I mean, it's a miracle that I came out of this experience with and was able to develop a stronger relationship with Source, instead of completely walking away from it, like so many people that have these experiences do.
I bet. So, I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I've been able to help so many people along the way because of it. And it comes through my coaching too, because anybody who's been through any sort of traumatic event or abusive relationship or anything like that, it's all the same formula.
Yeah.
And it's all the same healing that's necessary. So it's just, it's been really great having this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And everything that you talked about, like the resources and the books, and then how to get a hold of you, and you're attached down below in the description box. So make sure you send it to me. So your Facebook page, your Instagram, and your YouTube channel, and anything else. And so if you guys want to, contact Kristen, if you have any more questions, or if you want to put a comment down below, if you have questions, just let us know. We're very active in our comment section. We're very, we like to connect with everybody watching. So yeah, let us know if you have questions. And thank you so much, Kristen, for coming on. And thank you for sharing this. I mean, you can tell how much you've healed being able to talk about this experience and still being so strong in your energy. You really can see that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great. Great to be here.
Good. All right, thank you guys. Thanks for checking out one of my videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.